And joining me now in studio is Nik Naidu from the Fiji Coalition for Democracy and Fijian journalist Ruci Farrell. Nik, first to you, this coup here, this so-called coup, kidnapping of the government, you know, was it one of those sudden things, or was there a lot of things going on in Fiji that could have led up to this, you think?
Okay, first of all, I'd just like to say that we're all very disturbed and distressed by the events of the last few days. And I think the majority of Fiji's people, including the Fijian people who live here, are very upset with what's happened. And we all hope that there's a peaceful resolution very soon to this crisis. And our thoughts are with the families of those that are still being detained by the gunmen. I hope that things turn out okay in the next few days. But to answer your question, it's a tough one. I mean, there's been problems throughout the last 12 months in terms of there was a small group, and by small I mean a really small group that, you know, were not happy with what had happened. And I presume, you know, the last few months of marches and things were organized by them. But in terms of the coup, I think no one really expected it. I mean, there's a peaceful way to express your opinions in a democratic society, and, you know, marching and writing letters have all been happening, and that's quite normal even in New Zealand society.
Okay, over to you, Ruci Farrell. We've heard to date that people are being released from the hostage situation in Fiji, but when this all started, George Speight said he had the support of Indigenous Fijians for this move. Where do you see his statement?
No, I don't think he represents the aspirations of the whole indigenous race in Fiji. I think this is just purely a group of businessmen whose deals have gone wrong. I was speaking to a security guard early this morning trying to gauge what's happening in Fiji, and according to him, what George Speight has done is not according to what the Fijian people wanted. The protest march previous to Mr. Speight's actions was one way that the Fijians hoped to lodge their opinions and voice what they thought were their concerns. What happened, what transpired after that has nothing to do with the Fijian race. So it's entirely independent, and it's just a group of businessmen. I think it's just Mr. Speight and the colleagues that are standing beside him.
Just coming back to you, Nik, that's a very good point that Ruthi brings up. A small group of businessmen, but preying on some very real fears, aren't they?
Yes, I mean, there's a lot of insecurity amongst Fiji people, both business people and just the normal community. You know, once you take away people's basic rights, I mean, what's left if you don't have freedom? And unfortunately, you know, over the last 20 years, there's been a lot of business activities that are questionable in Fiji, and part of the last few governments has been to, you know, try and resolve these, and maybe that's part of the problem.
Because we do have more information about George Speight, and he's been described by some media as a failed businessman. Do you think that's partly motivated him to go to this extreme?
It's really hard to say. I mean, we can all speculate. I mean, there are problems at the moment in terms of him being investigated, and whether these sort of resulted in him taking, you know, the country into his own hands and things into,
But the danger is that people like that can do this because of the seething undercurrents in Fiji, do you think? We've had an Indian Prime Minister for a year now, and by all, by all circumstances, it looks like it's a rosy, happy government that we've seen in Fiji, but all of a sudden, bang, we have this what looks like a coup.
Yeah. I think in the future, this is a real disaster for the country and for the people of Fiji, in terms of, you know, politically, economically, and socially. And I think there'll be a lot of soul-searching and thinking to be done in the next few years as how to resolve this problem of people, you know, who want to just take up arms, in a small group, you know, maybe just a few hundred people, if that, who want to just take over, you know, government. I mean, how can we resolve it?
Yes.
Yeah, that'll be a big question.
Ruthi, we're slowly seeing that this is a small band of people who, for their own reasons and ends, want to take over government. But are the Fijian people wising up, do you think, about this whole process as a result of what we've seen over the last 3 days.
Yes, they have. Just picking up on what Nikhil was saying, the gentleman that I was talking to this morning, he echoes the thoughts of most low-income families. He said he's been on $1.10 an hour for the last 8 years as a security guard. And I asked him, what about the repercussions from now on? And he said he's worried because now his villages won't have jobs. The Indian people, the Indian businesses will move their business interests elsewhere. Where will they go for their jobs? Where will they have the money to pay for education, for school, and for housing and all that sort of thing? So the average normal person back home in Fiji is thinking about the future repercussions of what's happening in Fiji.
Because the Labour Party did have quite a major victory in the last election, didn't they?
Yes.
A victory borne by the fact that a lot of Indigenous Fijians actually voted for this government, didn't they?
Yes. So the fact that they voted for Chowdhury, they voted for better living conditions, better wages, and that was not immediately forthcoming. I think Chowdhury tended to concentrate overly on issues that were very sensitive to the average Fijian, land issues. Scholarships, he was offering scholarships to all Fijians and Indians on a 50-50 basis.
Okay, Ruthie, I've got to interrupt you there because we've run out of time. Thank you very much for coming in, and you too, Nik Naidu, thanks very much for your time. To news from our Pacific